You are standing at the edge of a backyard pond that produces more protein per square meter than a cattle ranch, more food in a single weekend than most families buy in a month, and it costs almost nothing to maintain once it is up and running. The Amish families I visited in Lancaster County called it their silent pantry. They have been operating systems like this for generations. And in several counties of Pennsylvania and Ohio, local ordinances quietly made it harder to have one without permits. The Amish kept building them anyway. Today, I'm going to show you exactly what they built, because it works. And the technique I will reveal at the end of this video, one I have never seen printed in a single conventional gardening or self-sufficiency guide, is going to change forever how you think about food independence. Stay until the end, because what I am about to share will rewire how you see your own backyard. If you are the kind of person who believes that real, practical knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect somebody else's profit margin, subscribe to this channel and hit the bell. We bring you the forgotten wisdom of how families used to feed themselves before the supply chain owned them, the forbidden origin. Let me start with something most people do not know. This system did not begin with the Amish. It began in the year 475 before Christ, when a Chinese farmer named Fan Li wrote a treatise called the Yang Yu Jing, in which he described a method of household pond aquaculture so efficient that a single installation could feed a family for decades, without buying feed, without permits, without depending on anybody. His system survived wars, dynasties, collapsed empires, because that knowledge was too valuable to be lost. The Amish, who have spent 3 centuries perfecting the art of ignoring industrial agriculture, recognize the same logic. A pond that feeds itself is a pond that cannot be taxed, that cannot be interrupted by supply chains, and that cannot be taken away by a price hike at the supermarket. I spent 2 weeks in Holmes County, Ohio, watching how several Amish families silently maintain these systems behind their barns. And what I saw made me genuinely ashamed of how I had been feeding my own family for 40 years. Here's the part of the history that almost no one has heard. In the 7th century after Christ, during the Tang dynasty in China, the emperor banned the breeding of common carp throughout the empire. His surname Li sounded too similar to the Chinese word for carp, and he considered it disrespect. Farmers had depended on carp as their main protein source for more than 1,000 years. So when the prohibition came, they faced a crisis that forced them to do something extraordinary. Instead of starving, they began to raise multiple species together in the same pond. Mud carp that cleaned the bottom, silver carp that filtered the algae in the middle column of the water, grass carp that grazed on the surface, bighead carp that consumed zooplankton. Each species occupied a distinct ecological niche. No competition, no waste. A stacked self-regulating system more productive than anything before. That accidental policy created the first true polyculture pond system in the world. By the year 1200, when European travelers documented Chinese civilization, the village fish ponds were described as a defining feature of the landscape. Some of those ponds were centuries old and still produced thousands of pounds of protein per year. Nobody added feed. The ponds fed themselves. That closed-loop ecosystem is precisely what the Amish families I visited had quietly running in rural Ohio. And it is what most Americans have never been told is possible in their own backyard. Why I felt ashamed. Now here is where this becomes personal for me. I spent decades doing conventional farming. I bought feed. I bought antibiotics. I bought fences, waterers, feeders, supplements. Every year the costs went up. Every year I became more dependent on a supply chain I did not control. And every year a new product appeared at the farm store, promising to fix exactly the problem the previous product had created. I was not farming. I was subscribed to a system designed to keep me spending. The first time I set foot on an Amish property in Lancaster County and saw a modest pond, maybe 10 by 15 feet, sitting quietly next to the kitchen garden, I did not understand what I was seeing. The farmer, a man in his 60s who had never bought a single pound of commercial fish feed in his life, told me that pond had been operating for more than 30 years. He pulled fish out twice a year. His ducks lived next to it. His family ate eggs from those ducks almost every morning. I asked him how much he had invested. He told me the family had dug it by hand over a long weekend. They sealed it with clay. They filled it from a well. Basically, that was all. I went home and started building mine the following month. Hit the like button if this story is hitting something inside you. It takes 1 second, but it helps this video reach more families who deserve to hear what was hidden from them. The 4 components. This system has 4 components, and they work together like a single living machine. The first one is the ducts. This is the piece that most backyard pond guides leave out completely, and it is the piece that makes everything else work. The ducts are not decoration. They are the biological managers of your entire ecosystem. When they swim, they stir up the sediments from the bottom and release nutrients into the water column. When they eat and digest, they return nitrogen directly to the pond. That nitrogen feeds the algae. The algae feed the phytoplankton. The zooplankton feeds the small fish. The small fish feed the big fish. Research on integrated aquaculture systems shows that ducks with access to a pond can obtain up to 30% of their total nutritional needs by foraging insects, aquatic plants, and small organisms in the water. That means you reduce your feed costs by almost a third, just by letting them do what ducks naturally do. Khaki Campbell ducks, the most suitable breed for this system, lay between 280 and 340 eggs per year per bird. A small group of 3 ducks will give your family between 840 and 1,020 eggs per year. That equals 175 eggs per month from birds that are simultaneously managing the ecosystem of your pond. You are not choosing between ducks and fish. You are stacking them. Each function multiplies the yield of all the others. The aquatic plants. The second component is aquatic plants, and this is where most beginners make their biggest mistake. They treat the plants as something optional. They are not. They are the filtration system, the oxygen supply, and one of the most productive food sources of the entire installation. Cattails planted along the shallow edges of the pond act as one of the most efficient biological filters on Earth. Their root systems extract excess nitrogen and phosphorus from the water, preventing algae blooms and keeping the ecosystem balanced. A ring of cattails around the shallow shelf of your pond will do more for water quality than any mechanical filter you could buy. Water lilies provide shade, which reduces water temperature in summer and dramatically decreases evaporation. Submerged plants like hornwort release oxygen during daylight hours, something crucial for fish health in warm climates. Floating plants like water lettuce absorb nutrients with such efficiency that municipal wastewater treatment plants use them at industrial scale. Research in integrated aquaculture has shown that aquatic plants can remove up to 90% of the nitrogen waste produced by the fish. The plants absorb it, the water stays clean, the fish stay healthy. And you do almost nothing apart from observing. The fish then, there's the third component. The fish themselves. I want to be specific here because this is the point where regulations matter and where I see people make costly mistakes. In most of the United States, channel catfish and bluegill are your safest and most productive options. Bluegill requires almost zero management. You introduce it once, you leave a breeding population at each harvest, and it reproduces on its own indefinitely. It reaches a harvestable size of 6 to 8 inches in approximately 2 years in a well-managed pond. Channel catfish grows faster, reaching between 1 and 2 pounds in 18 months when the pond ecosystem produces enough natural food. Tilapia is the fastest growing of all, reaching 1 pound in 5 or 6 months, and a small pond with 50 tilapia fingerlings can yield between 40 and 50 pounds of harvestable fish in a single growing season. However, tilapia does not survive water temperatures below 50 degrees Fahrenheit, which means those who live in northern climates must harvest it before winter or keep it indoors. It is also illegal in some states because of invasive species concerns. So check your state fish and wildlife regulations before buying it. The Amish families I visited in Ohio raised mainly bluegill and catfish because those fish demanded nothing from them and gave back harvest year after year without failing. That was the point. Self-sufficiency. The invisible workers, the fourth component, and the most invisible, is the beneficial bacteria. These microscopic workers convert the ammonia from the fish waste first into nitrites and then into nitrates that your plants absorb. This nitrogen cycle is the backbone of the entire system. Once established, it balances itself. You are not managing a farm. You are caring for a living ecosystem that has been doing this work without human help for millions of years. Your only task is to create the conditions and then step aside. Comment below where you live and what kind of climate you have. I want to know who is reading this and what zone you are in. The answers in the comments help other families watching this figure out what is possible on their land. Real numbers. So how much does it really cost to build this? And how do you start? I want to give you real numbers because vague promises were exactly what convinced me to buy the wrong things for 20 years. For a family scale pond of approximately 10 by 15 feet, with a depth of 4 to 5 feet in the center, the total installation cost is between $400 and $600. That includes an EPDM rubber liner at $1 to $2 per square foot, fingerlings for between $20 and $50 for your first population, ducklings for between $30 and $60 for a small starter flock, and basic aquatic plants for between $50 and $100. That is all. Compare it to a decade of supermarket meat expenses, and you start to understand why this knowledge has been so quietly ignored. How to start: choose a location that receives at least 6 hours of sun per day, but not all the afternoon sun that overheats the water. Choose the lowest point of your land, where water already tends to accumulate naturally after rain. If you fight against the natural contours of your land, you will spend years fighting against erosion and drainage problems. Create a shallow shelf around the edges, approximately 1 foot deep and 2 to 3 feet wide. That is your marsh zone, where the plants will take root. The deepest part in the center, 4 to 5 feet, is where your fish will shelter during extreme heat or cold. If you have soil with a lot of clay, you can seal the pond the traditional way, lining it with 6 inches of moist clay, compacting it well, and letting it cure for 2 weeks. This method has worked without modifications for thousands of years. If your soil is sandy or rocky, use an EPDM liner that will last between 20 and 30 years. Introduce the life in stages. Start with the plants. Give them 2 to 4 weeks to take root and for the beneficial bacteria to begin colonizing every surface of the pond. Then add your ducks. Within days, you will see how the pond activates. The water will become slightly cloudy as the ducks stir up the sediments. That is not a problem. It is the ecosystem waking up. After another month, add your fish. Introduce about 50 fingerlings per 1,000 gallons of water. They will disappear immediately into the depths and you will not see them for weeks. Do not panic. Do not add more fish. They are down there growing in the cool, dark water, eating the phytoplankton that your ducks have been cultivating for a month without knowing it. For the first 6 months, you do almost nothing. You watch the ducks. You check the water clarity. You remove excess duckweed if it starts to cover the surface. You refill the water level during dry periods. That is the entire maintenance program. By the 6th month, you will start to see silver flashes when you approach the shore. Your fish are now visible and growing fast. By the end of the first year, depending on the species, you will have fish approaching harvest size and ducks laying between 700 and 900 eggs in their first full production year. By the 3rd year, you will no longer be managing a project. You will simply be harvesting from a living ecosystem that has permanently woven itself into your land. The winter question. There is one thing I should address before getting to the end. Something that most pond guides leave out completely: winter. If you live in a northern climate where ponds freeze, your fish can survive under the ice as long as there is a small opening on the surface for gas exchange. A simple pond deicer that costs about $40 maintains that opening throughout the winter. Bluegill and catfish enter a natural state of dormancy in cold water and survive under the ice for months without feeding. Your ducks, being cold-hardy birds, will continue laying in winter if you give them a simple 3-sided shelter with straw bedding. The system does not stop in winter. It slows down, it conserves itself, and it reactivates in spring exactly where it left off. The forbidden technique, now. At the beginning of this video, I promised you something I have never seen mentioned in a conventional gardening book, in a self-sufficiency guide, or on a YouTube channel about home food production. What I am about to tell you was shown to me by an Amish farmer in Holmes County on my 2nd visit. He called it the simplest free feed in the world. And once I understood what he was doing in his pond, I could not believe I had spent 40 years raising animals without it. The plant is duckweed. I do not mean the concept of duckweed as an aquatic plant that you sometimes see floating in a country pond. I am referring to duckweed deliberately cultivated, strategically harvested, and used as a free, self-replicating protein source that costs you absolutely nothing once established. And here is why this matters. In optimal conditions, duckweed doubles its total biomass in less than 48 hours. That means that a small mat of duckweed can become an enormous mat in a single week. Duckweed contains between 35 and 45% crude protein on a dry basis. More than soybean meal, the protein source on which the entire commercial poultry and fish feed industry rests. Your ducks will consume it as fast as it grows. Your fish will eat what the ducks do not reach, and the duckweed absorbs nitrogen from the duck and fish waste, cleaning the water at the same time it produces food. It is simultaneously a filter, a fertilizer, and a forage crop. It costs nothing to establish, nothing to maintain, and nothing to harvest. That Amish farmer in Holmes County had not bought commercial duck feed in more than 4 years. His pond was producing enough duckweed protein to supplement the natural forage of insects and plants that his ducks were already getting from the pond ecosystem itself. I have been using this same system for 2 years, and my feed costs have gone down more than 60%. When I asked him why more people do not do this, he simply looked at me with that expression Amish men use when the answer is too obvious to say out loud, because the people who sell you the feed do not want you to know. The final truth, what you have just learned, is not a gardening trick. It is not a self-sufficiency hack. It is the recovery of a biological truth that has fed more human beings throughout history than any other protein system ever devised. And that has been quietly displaced by an industrial food model that needs your dependence to function. Every bag of commercial feed you buy is a vote in favor of that dependence. Every meter of pond ecosystem you build is a vote against it. The families I visited in Lancaster and Holmes counties were not doing anything heroic or dramatic. They were simply refusing to forget. I want to know something from you in the comments after watching this. What part of this system are you going to build first? The pond, the ducks, or the duckweed? Tell me specifically where you are going to start and what you feel right now is the biggest obstacle. Because the answers in the comments help other people watching this discover what their first step should be. And subscribe, because what we are going to discover next makes all of this look like just the beginning of something much bigger.